Alright, battlers, welcome back to a brand new Sinister Cup video. This is a 5-0 Sinister Cup sweep. My friend Indigo was kind enough to send me this battle footage, and I cannot wait to show you these battles. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about the trainer and his team. Indigo does hail from Mexico. I am leaving his Twitter and YouTube links in the description below. Please follow him and check out his YouTube channel as well. Indigo's Pokemon community is called True Pokemon Trainers. In Season 1, Indigo had an incredible run. From Boulder Cup through Kingdom Cup, he was 5-0. He won every single major cup, and he pushed himself up to 6th ranking in the world globally. So this is an elite trainer, an elite battler, and his battle footage does not disappoint, guys. You don't want to miss this. Indigo's team is going to be Dusclops, Alola Marowak, Medicham, Poliwrath, Probopass, and Steelix. Taking a look at the moves, Dusclops is going to be running Hex as opposed to Feint Attack, so it will get to those charge moves quickly. It is going to have Fire Punch and Shadow Punch as well. Alola Marowak is a Fire Spin variant. It's not going to get to the moves quite as quickly as it would with Hex, but that Fire Spin gives it additional coverage against the walls like Mawile and Steelix. It also does have Bone Club and Shadow Ball. Indigo's Medicham is running Counter, Psychic, and Power-Up Punch. Poliwrath is using Bubble as opposed to the Legacy Mudshot. He does have Dynamic Punch and Ice Punch as well. Probopass is using Spark, Thunderbolt, and Rock Slide. And finally, Steelix is running Dragon Tail. There's no Thunder Fang on this Steelix here. It also has Crunch and Earthquake, so those Dragon Tails are going to charge up those moves pretty quick. Indigo goes 5 rounds in this cup, facing some pretty fierce competition. Let's get into these battles. Trainers, as always, please like, comment, and subscribe. I love hearing from you, and I try to respond to every single comment. Your likes mean so much to me as well. We just hit 100 subscribers, and I just can't believe it. I cannot wait to see where we go from here, and it's all because of you. Indigo's first opponent is going to be using Poliwrath, Steelix, Mawile, Medicham, Alola Marowak, and Drifblim. This trainer's name is Davidgabo. I'm just going to call him David. Indigo is going to lead with that Dusclops. He does have Alola Marowak and Poliwrath in the back. Indigo is going to face off against this Drifblim. This is actually a favorable matchup for that Dusclops as long as he doesn't get hit by the Shadow Ball. So he's going to go straight for that Shadow Punch, and it lands successfully. This Drifblim did charge up to a Shadow Ball, but it's just the Ominous Wind, so Indigo did shield out of necessity, just protecting his Dusclops. He's going to fire off another Shadow Punch and take down that Drifblim. So in comes Mawile, and luckily this Dusclops has the Fire Punch ready. He is going to use it against the Mawile. It is shielded, so the icing on the cake is if Dusclops can get to a second Fire Punch here. It's going to survive this Power-Up Punch, and then it almost gets to that Fire Punch, but the bites take it down. That's okay though. Indigo brings in his Bubble Wrath. He is going to start to do some work on this Mawile. The hope is that he can get to the Dynamic Punch, and that would one-shot this Mawile in this range. Mawile does fire off another Power-Up Punch. It didn't have nearly enough bites for the Play Rough, so that's not a concern. In comes the Dynamic Punch, but it's shielded as well. So now Indigo's opponent does know that he does have Dynamic Punch. He brings in Medicham, and Indigo responds with his Alola Marowak. He's going to shield that Psychic to keep his Marowak topped off, and then fire off the Shadow Ball against the Medicham. Shields were down, so that was going to be a one-shot. In comes the Mawile yet again, but the Fire Spin does good work, and the Bone Club will finish it off. Indigo takes round 1. Taking a look at round 2, he's going to lead with that Dusclops yet again. He does have Poliwrath and Alola Marowak in the back. This time Dusclops is going to face off against that Marowak. This is a Hex Marowak, so he does need to watch out for that fast charging Shadow Ball. He does go here for the Shadow Punch, and it does connect, which is great. Dusclops is just so bulky and so tricky to deal with, and its coverage is really great as well. It makes an excellent safe switch. He does shield that Shadow Ball correctly, so he's already ahead on the energy game, and he does fire off another Shadow Punch against the Marowak. Marowak is going to release another move, and it is a second Shadow Ball. So Indigo let that one through and is fainted as a result, but his Bubble Wrath comes in, and 3 bubbles take down the Marowak. In comes Medicham, and Indigo is going to do the right thing. He goes straight for these Ice Punches, doing great work against Medicham, but he has to be wary of that Psychic. He does get to another Ice Punch here, and then attempt to make the swap, but it doesn't go through. Instead, that Psychic is going to be unleashed, and Poliwrath will fall. He does decide to bring in his Alola Marowak, and Medicham got at least 7 counters there, so I'm expecting the Psychic. and it is. However, Alola Marowak is so bulky, he's able to take that and just fire spin him down. In comes Steelix, and this is going to be tricky. He is going to fire off the Shadow Ball and not draw the shield, so that's excellent. He's now ahead in the HP game. He is going to get to the Bone Club as well, so he's putting a lot of pressure on the Steelix. A few more fire spins here. Now he cannot afford to get hit by the Crunch, so he is going to shield that, and then 3 more fire spins will bring down the Steelix. Taking a look at round 3, Indigo is going to lead with that Poliwrath. He does have Dusclops and Alola Marowak behind it, so a similar line. He's just going to change the flow, as Hero Vange would say. So here we go with Poliwrath into Medicham. That's not super favorable, so he is going to switch out in favor of that Dusclops. Medicham is going to fire off a move. He goes straight for the Psychic, so very aggressive move by this trainer, but it does pay off for him. He does take a huge chunk out of Dusclops. He is going to switch out into that Drifblim here, and luckily Indigo has a lot of energy from that Medicham matchup, so he does fire off the Shadow Punch, and then he goes for another Shadow Punch here. So he's putting a ton of pressure on this Drifblim. This Blim is going to shield the second Shadow Punch though, and Indigo thinks he can get to another one, so he's going to shield his Dusclops as well. However, it might have been a CMP tie there. The Drifblim gets to the Ominous Wind first. Indigo is going to hang on to that shield and actually let his Dusclops fall. In comes the Poliwrath. He's trying to bubble down this Drifblim. He knows he can take the Ominous Wind, no problem, and he does. Now it is 2 pokes versus 2 pokes, 1 shield each. In comes that Medicham, who's weakened from earlier. He goes straight for that Ice Punch, and his opponent will shield. Luckily, he does get to another Ice Punch here, so this is great. He's going to do a lot of work on that Medicham, and then almost able to bubble it down, but it gets 1 more charge move off. It is the Dynamic Punch, and it does bring down the Poliwrath, but now you've got Alola Marowak with 1 shield versus Steelix. Now this is a Fire Spin Marowak, so things are looking good for him. All he needs to do is shield that Earthquake, and I think he's got this game as well. He's going to shield this first attack, which is Crunch, so the question is, can that Steelix get to another Earthquake? And no, it can't. He actually gets to that Bone Club just in time, and he is going to sweep his first opponent. Indigo's next opponent is Cables29 with Poliwrath, Steelix, Gardevoir, Banette, Claydol, and Alolan Marowak. Looking at round 1, Indigo will lead with that Poliwrath. He does have Steelix and Dusclops in the back. This is the first time we've seen this Steelix. So in comes that Banette, and you can tell that it's not a return Banette because it doesn't have the aura surrounding it. He is going to lead with Poliwrath and fire off the Ice Punch. Now Banette does have access to some interesting moves, one of them being Thunder. So knowing that, Indigo is going to shield this Thunder here and put that Banette at a terrible disadvantage in terms of energy. So he's going to fire off the Ice Punch here and finish it off. With the lead secured, he is going to face off against his opponent's Poliwrath. He's going to go straight for the Dynamic Punch here, and it does a huge amount of damage to the opponent Poliwrath. Again, this is the first round against a new opponent, and you never know what your Poliwrath might be carrying, so do be careful. He's going to go for the Ice Punch here against the Poliwrath and attempted to bring it down, but his opponent is going to shield. We are in a 0 shield situation. His opponent does go for the Ice Punch, and a couple more bubbles will bring it down. Indigo has to be feeling pretty good. He knows that he can tank whatever this is, except perhaps the Hydro Pump, which he knows that this Poliwrath does not have. So he's going to fire off 4 hexes, attempting to hex down the Poliwrath, but he gets to another Ice Punch. That's okay, 1 more hex, and this Dusclops has a ton of energy. He's going to fire off the Fire Punch here against the Steelix. Does super effective damage, and then he'll actually swap into his own Steelix. He knows this Steelix is within KO range if he can get to the Earthquake. His opponent, Steelix, does get to the Earthquake, but that's okay. His Steelix had almost full health, so it doesn't bring him down. He's actually going to have a little bit of trouble with his screen here. We did talk about that. He wasn't able to swipe and get the excellent there on the Earthquake. So Steelix will go down, and then in comes the Dusclops. A little bit of a close call, but he's going to use the Shadow Punch here, and in spite of the technical difficulties, will win. For round 2, he's going to lead with Alola Marowak with that Dusclops and Steelix in the back. So we're going to run Alola Marowak into Steelix. It is a Fire Spin variant, so his opponent is learning that for the first time. He does go for the Bone Club here, and as you can see, his screen is working much better now. Super effective damage, and he's going to continue to work with these Fire Spins. He does opt to shield here, wary, I think, of the Earthquake, but it's just a crunch. So this Steelix has a ton of energy. Let's see if he shields. And he does. So this Steelix wants to get to another move. He's got energy. He's ready to go. And it turns out it is another crunch. So his opponent does bail out. In comes the Alola Marowak, and he's going to go straight for the Shadow Ball. It is shielded, so he does earn that second shield, and then he's going to swap into his Marowak. So this is a Fire Spin Marowak versus Steelix. It's a reverse of what we saw in the opening. However, the difference is that the shields are down, and one Earthquake is going to wipe out this Alola Marowak. That's exactly what Indigo goes for here. Steelix is so deadly in the end game with the Earthquake, it is a force to be reckoned with. He's going to fire off the Crunch here to take down the opposing Steelix, and he does. In comes Gardevoir, and Gardevoir, it doesn't stand much of a chance here. He is going to fire off yet another Crunch and do great work against Gardevoir. It's about half health, and in comes the Alola Marowak. He's trying to spam this Gardevoir as quickly as possible to bring it down. The Bone Club will land, and then a couple Fire Spins. The Gardevoir's last dying gasp is going to be the Shadow Ball, but that's okay. He does bring in the Dusclops to wrap up the match. For round 2, Indigo will bring Poliwrath, Probopass, and that Dusclops. This is the first time we're seeing Probopass. In comes the Steelix lead, so Indigo has already won this lead. It's looking favorable for him. In comes Banette, and he's actually going to go here into the Dusclops, which is a curious choice because those Shadow Claws are going to do a ton of damage. He does have to shield that Shadow Ball correctly, and then he's going to go for the Shadow Punch here. Banette is pretty squishy, so maybe this will pay off. He goes for a second Shadow Punch here, attempting to bring down the Banette, and he draws the second shield. So his opponent, Cables, has sacrificed both shields on the Banette. He's going to let that Shadow Ball land. Knowing that he has a good fighter and a bulky option in the back, he does bring out the Probopass here, attempting to spark down the Banette, but it doesn't do enough damage, so he does have to go for the Rock Slide here. He does have some good energy though, and he is expecting to swap. In comes that Steelix, and look at this, next level swap by Indigo. Dynamic Punch lands, doing a ton of damage. A few more bubbles are really working this Steelix down. He does shield the Earthquake properly, and he's got a ton of energy, and the Alola Marowak comes in. So he's going to fire off these Ice Punches here. This isn't a clear-cut situation. This Marowak could still cause him a lot of trouble, so I'm interested to see how he plays it out. He's already got a huge health advantage, and look at this, guys. The third Ice Punch, and this Alola Marowak is going down quick. Again, a very, very smooth swap by Indigo into the Probopass to absorb that Shadow Ball. And this is all but GG's. The Marowak is going to fire off the Bone Club here, bringing Probopass very weak. It almost gets the Rock Slide, but in comes the Bubble Wrath to wrap things up. Going to the next round, his opponent is going to be carrying Poliwrath, Steelix, Ferrothorn, Claydol, Alola Marowak, and Mawile. His opponent is called Zatronoide. I'm just going to call him Zat. Indigo will lead with that Steelix. He does have Medicham in the back with the Dusclops. He's going to lead Steelix into the Claydol. So this is a Confusion Claydol, and you know you need to watch out for those Earth powers and especially the Earthquake. But the Steelix does have that Crunch. So the Crunch is a Dark type move that will really wreck Psychic types like Claydol. He does fire off the Earth power here as expected, but he does get to another Crunch as well. So he's putting a ton of pressure on this Claydol. He does draw that shield from it, which is great. His opponent Claydol goes for another Earth power, and it's actually going to bring the Steelix very low. And then his opponent tries to farm down the Steelix by switching into Bubble Wrath, but Indigo is able to fire off the Crunch and then bring in his Medicham. So obviously wary of Ice Punches and of the Hydro Pump. His opponent does throw a Fighting type charge attack. I believe it was Dynamic Punch. Yes, in comes another Dynamic Punch, and here goes Indigo with the Power Punch. He's going to attempt to counter down the Poliwrath. Here comes another Power Punch here, so again, just unleashing all of this energy he's gained, and one more counter will do the trick. So Indigo has 3 Pokemon, but he is out of shields. In comes the weakened Claydol, and he just goes for the counters here, which I definitely think is the right move. That Claydol falls, and now it is 1 versus 3, and it is Ferrothorn. So Ferrothorn is Grass and Steel. It has to really watch out for these Fire Punches, and they are flying. That one Fire Punch landed, and his opponent Ferrothorn is going to fire off the Power Whip. He's going to go here for a Shadow Punch instead of the Fire Punch to draw the shield. Very mindful of the energy efficiency here, and then the Shadow Punch here will almost wrap it up. I think we need one more Hex, and I believe Dusclops might survive this. It does not. So in comes a Medicham, and one counter will tie this match up. Going into the next round, Indigo is going to lead with that Alola Marowak. In comes the Poliwrath, and as you can tell by the moves and the animation, this is a Mudshot Poliwrath. So a lot of folks are running the Mudshot Poliwrath with Dynamic Punch and Hydro Pump, and we saw a Dynamic Punch there. His opponent does switch into Steelix, so Indigo's going to go for the Bone Club and draw the shield, and then here comes the big Shadow Ball. Let's see if it pays off. And it does. Takes a huge chunk out of that Steelix. These Fire Spins are also adding up quickly. He is going to shield this Earthquake, so Indigo is doing all the right things. He's at a huge energy advantage here. The Steelix is going to fall from this next Bone Club, and his opponent does decide to bring in that Bubble Wrath, or excuse me, Mudshot Poliwrath. In comes another Shadow Ball, though, from Indigo, and his opponent does shield that, keeping his Poliwrath around, but I don't think it looks very good for his opponent, Zat. Indigo's going to think things over and decide to bring in that Medicham. It is fully healthy, and the shields are down, so this is a very favorable situation. In comes the Dynamic Punch, and then in comes Claydol. Indigo is going to absorb that Earth Power, no problem. He does go here for the Shadow Punch, which is obviously the right move. He's going to start to whittle down this Claydol, but Claydol can be dangerous when the shields are down, especially if it's carrying Earth Power and Psychic, because that Psychic will definitely #wreck those fighters. So in comes another charge move at the very last moment, but Medicham comes in and he has a Psychic prepped, and look at this, guys. Gonna wrap this up like a present. One Psychic will bring down Poliwrath, and Indigo wins. Going to the next round, Indigo will lead with Medicham. He does have that Alola Marowak and Dusclops behind it. Medicham's going to lead into Mawile, so this is perfect for him. He's going to start working on these counters. Now, Medicham is part Psychic, so these bites are going to do a little bit of damage to him, but this Power Punch is going to ramp up much more quickly than the Mawile can hurt him. He does fire off the Power Punch here, maybe an opportunity to build up to the Psychic there. But again, he's just trying to get as much damage in as possible. Now, when you have a triple boosted Psychic, that is going to destroy whatever it comes into contact with, and Indigo knows this, so he is going to shield his Medicham and keep coming with these counters. In comes a charge move from the Poliwrath here, and it is Dynamic Punch. Indigo does survive that. His opponent's got one shield, and he's got to make a choice. Is he going to absorb these attacks from the Medicham that's already so ramped up, or is he going to shield? He does decide to shield, and look at this, guys. Medicham can be such a hoss. I was really concerned that it wouldn't be very good in this cup because of all the ghost types running around, but if it beats all the steals and most, or if not all of the fighters, I think it's a really, really good choice. I actually ran Medicham in my cups as well, because I enjoyed using it so much. In comes that Dusclops, and here we go with the crunches from Steelix. He is going to fire off the Fire Punch here to take down the Steelix, and then in comes that Mawile, and look at this, guys. Perfect switch into Alola Marowak. Power Punch is going to hurt a little bit, and those bites will stack, but one more Bone Club is all that's needed. Indigo's next opponent is Lmartinez. I'm just going to call him Martinez. He is bringing Lugia, Drifblim, Steelix, Poliwrath, Alola Marowak, and the Medicham. This is the first Lugia we've seen, and I will say that this trainer also brought a lot of notes and printouts. He was very studied up. Indigo's going to lead with that Dusclops, with the Alola Marowak, and the Probopass. I think since Sylph changed the rules and doesn't allow you to run sims during the matches, you really need to come prepared, so definitely feel comfortable bringing notebooks. I know some players might not do it because they feel like it's a crutch, but if it helps you to battle and it helps you to remember the matchups, there's so many matchups we have to remember and so many things we have to keep track of. If you can simplify it for yourself, I don't think you should be ashamed. I think you should do whatever works and embrace it. So in this game, we are watching Dusclops take on the Drifblim. He does get to the Shadow Punch here, and although Dusclops is dangerously low, he does bring down that Drifblim, so Indigo wins the lead and switch priority. And the best part is that there's not a whole lot of Dusclops to farm. So whenever you win the lead like this, it's a great situation if you don't give your opponent much of a lead in terms of energy afterwards. So he's going to mull things over. He decides to bring in that Alola Marowak, and this isn't a super great position for Indigo because that Bubble Wrath is going to land the Hydro Pump, goodness, and he does have that Probopass in the back. So he does need to watch out for those big attacks like Dynamic Punch, like Hydro Pump. In comes the Dynamic Punch. He's actually going to go here for the Thunderbolt. I do think he will earn the shield here, and he does. He's going to try to get to one more Thunderbolt, and he actually is going to go for the Rock Slide. He thinks he's within KO range, and he is. So he does bring down that Poliwrath, but at a great price. It's Steelix versus the Probopass, and all Steelix has to do to win is get to that Earthquake. This is not looking good for Indigo. And here comes the big charge move. The Earthquake will bring down Probopass, and Indigo loses round 1. Going into round 2, Indigo will lead with the Dusclops. He does face off against that Drifblim again. Let's see if he decides to play it differently. He is going to go straight for the Shadow Punch, which I think he should. He's putting a lot of pressure on the Drifblim early on. In comes a charge move from Drifblim, and he's actually going to drop the shield. He does absorb that Ominous Wind. 3 more hexes like clockwork. Another Shadow Punch flies, and is bringing that Drifblim down. So his opponent has 2 shields. In comes the Poliwrath, and this is starting to look very familiar. He is going to use these bubbles against the Dusclops. And again, his opponent's investing in that Poliwrath. He thinks it might be the key to this match, so he does give it a shield. He absorbs that 1 Shadow Punch, but he's got a ton of energy. In comes a Medicham, and here comes a charge move from this Poliwrath. Expecting the Hydro Pump, he does shield, but it's just Dynamic Punch. So the mind games are in full swing. Here comes a Power-Up Punch from the Medicham. He's starting to whittle down this Poliwrath, but I don't know how this match is going to end, guys. He does shield the Hydro Pump, which is a great move by him, but that Poliwrath puts so much pressure on his team. In comes Steelix, and Indigo has to be breathing a sigh of relief because these power-up punches are going to stack very quickly. And if he needs to, he can even use that Probopass as a sacrificial swap. Here comes the 3rd power-up punch. Personally, I would switch after this, and he does, but not even needed. Down falls the Steelix. In the 3rd round, Indigo will lead Dusclops. He does have Medicham and Probo in the back. So Dusclops is going to face off against Drifblim for a 3rd time. So let's see how these players play this match. This Drifblim is actually going to get to the move first. He does fire off the Ominous Wind. Indigo decides to shield this time. He's actually going to go for the Shadow Punch here and go for another one. And he does get the 2nd one before the Drifblim can get to a 2nd move. Shadow Punch is shielded that time. Drifblim, it's got a ton of energy though. Maybe enough for a Shadow Ball. It is the Ominous Wind again. So he does go here for the Shadow Punch. Indigo has sacrificed both shields on Dusclops, and his opponent sacrifices both shields on Drifblim. So for the first time in the series, his opponent... Oh no, I thought his opponent would win switch priority, but he doesn't. He's going to fire off the Shadow Punch against this Alola Marowak, and this is just the icing on the cake. He wins the lead, and he gets damage on a Ghost type like Marowak. Marowak is part Fire, so the Rock Slide is the way to go here. That Bone Club is super effective, and then in comes the Steelix. That's okay, Indigo's got a great answer in Medicham. He does go here for the Power-Up Punch, and you know what the drill is. He's going to start to ramp up these attacks. Steelix is going to go straight for the Crunch here, which is interesting. Oh, excuse me, it's Earthquake. Goes straight for that Earthquake there. I wasn't counting Dragon Tails that time, I apologize. In comes another Power-Up Punch, and this Medicham is getting ramped up. He does have a lot of energy, and in comes the Marowak, but he's not able to get to another move. Probopass is coming in, and the Rock Slides are flying. It's going to land on that Marowak, and then 1 Spark will win the game. Indigo's next opponent is Blast. Blast is going to be bringing Mawile, Steelix, Dusclops, Medicham, Claydol, and Poliwrath. Indigo is going to lead with that Alola Marowak. In comes the Dusclops and the Medicham behind it. Here we go with Marowak versus Claydol. This is the final round of the video, guys. This is for all the marbles. In comes that Medicham against the Dusclops, and that had to have been a misclick. I don't see any way that that would be on purpose. Here comes another Shadow Punch, guys, and the nerves are so high. I mean, in the championship game, when you're in the last round of a tournament, I mean, the adrenaline is pumping. You never know what can happen. The Psychic flies, and Indigo is actually going to let that one through. He does fire off another Shadow Punch here. Medicham is very weak, and 1 more Hex will bring him down. In comes the Dusclops Mirror. So perhaps his opponent didn't have a good answer for Dusclops, and that's just how the match kind of played out. Indigo has to be feeling pretty good. He does have the 2 shields, the Medicham and the Alola Marowak. In comes the Medicham to absorb these attacks. He's actually going to let that Shadow Punch through, and here we have a replay of what we just saw a moment ago, Medicham versus Dusclops. This Dusclops has a ton of energy. In comes that Claydol, and Indigo really wanted to line up his Marowak with the Claydol, and he does just that. Claydol does fire off the Earth Power. He does not get the defense drop, and Indigo is playing very aggressively. He goes straight for that Shadow Ball and does bring down the Claydol, so excellent choice by Indigo. In comes the Bone Clubs here, flying at this Dusclops. He is going to shield that Bone Club, and Indigo will return the favor with a shield of his own. I think he can survive one more Shadow Punch, and I think he can get to the Shadow Ball, attempting the switch there, but it doesn't go through in time. He does bring out his Medicham with a ton of stored energy, and the Psychic is incoming. It does bring down the Dusclops, and Indigo wins round 1. Taking a look at round 2, Indigo will lead with that Alola Marowak. In comes the Steelix. So he's going to use these fire spins. His opponent does encounter a little bit of lag, but the trainers decide to play it out. He is going to keep on going with the fire spins. In comes a charge move from Steelix. Turns out it is Crunch, not a huge deal. Looks like Indigo is going to respond with the Bone Club. He does super effective damage against the Steelix and goes for another Bone Club here, attempting to put pressure on him to burn shields or switch, and he does get the shield. Steelix goes for another charge move here, and it is Crunch yet again. These fire spins are doing good work, and his opponent is up a shield, but Marowak has a ton of energy, and that Shadow Ball is going to destroy whatever comes into contact with, which is Dusclops. Hoping his opponent would think it was a bait, and he did. He did not shield the Shadow Ball, which is huge for Indigo. He has got to be feeling very comfortable. He's going to continue to fire spin this Dusclops. Dusclops actually is going to swap out in favor of Claydol, and look at this. Shadow Ball time. Another Shadow Ball lands, and that Claydol is badly injured. It's going to actually get off a charge move here, but I think Indigo has done very well. This is going to be a wrap for him. He does hex down the Claydol. In comes Dusclops, and look at this, guys. Shadow Punch to tie this game up. Very, very well played by Indigo, guys. This was a great showcase on Dusclops and how to manage your team in a 5-round tournament. If you enjoyed this content, please go and follow Indigo on Twitter. Check out his YouTube channel as well. He plays music with his videos, and sometimes he shoutcasts in Spanish. So if you are a Spanish-speaking viewer and you would love to watch more Spanish-speaking shoutcasters, definitely check out his channel. Guys, if you enjoy this content, like, comment, and subscribe. I really appreciate you watching, and I'll see you in the next one.